Hey guys, tonight we are stepping barefoot onto the hot, cracked earth of ancient Egypt, where the sun never lets up, the Nile rules everything, and household chores involve some very questionable ingredients. Picture this. You're crouched beside a sun-dried mud wall, sweat tickling the back of your neck, trying to scrub soot from your clay pots with what looks suspiciously like a handful of crocodile dung. Yeah, you probably won't survive this, or at least not with your modern standards of cleanliness intact. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. Always fun to see this sleepy little community around the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself standing just outside your home in a small Egyptian village somewhere between 1500 and 1200 BCE. It's early morning, the air still breathable, and the sky is that pale lavender that promises yet another relentless day of sun. The Nile is only a few minutes' walk away. You hear the braying of donkeys, the clack of wooden sandals on stone, and the distant slap of papyrus mats being aired out. Your home is modest, but solid, made of sun-dried mud bricks stacked like a lumpy cake, with reeds and plaster sealing the cracks. The roof is flat and just strong enough to sit on during cooler evenings. Inside, it's dark and slightly cooler, though cool is relative. You can still smell last night's stew. And the week before, that's too. The floors are dry and dusty, always dusty. Your feet crunch softly on grit that somehow gets in even when you keep the door shut. You'll spend the better part of the morning sweeping it out with a fan of date palm fronds tied together. There's no escaping the dust. It's like the gods themselves have a personal vendetta against your clean floor. Out back, you keep your cleaning tools. The prized one is a bowl of whitish paste that smells faintly of ash, lye, and something else. If you had to guess, it's crocodile dung. Because it is. You know this, not because you invented the recipe. Someone in your village has passed it down. It's traditional, effective even, allegedly. The crocodile dung is dried and ground with natron, a naturally occurring salt from the Wadi Natron. This sticky, slightly abrasive mix serves as an all-purpose cleanser. Floors, clothes, even minor wounds. And no, there's no minty aftersmell. You get up early partly because it's cooler, but also because cleaning isn't just physical, it's spiritual. Ancient Egyptians believed that dust and dirt weren't just inconveniences. They were subtle signs of chaos, the opposite of Ma'at, the cosmic order. So when you clean, you're not just fighting grime, you're helping to keep the universe from unraveling. No pressure, of course. This morning, like every other, begins with sweeping. You bend over, your back already protesting, and start at the far end of the room, working methodically toward the door. The dust billows up like an insult. You cover your mouth with the edge of your linen scarf and mutter about maybe inventing windows that open. Then comes the scraping. The floor, hard-packed earth worn smooth by generations, collects grease from cooking and general foot traffic. You kneel with your stone scraper and set to work. The residue flakes off reluctantly. It's not glamorous, but you're oddly proud of it. There's a sense of accomplishment in scraping your floor clean with the same method your great-grandmother used. And then there's the dung paste. You fetch the sealed pot, peel back the linen cover, and are greeted with that unmistakable earthy musk. A little goes a long way. With a woven cloth dipped in water, you scoop up a bit of the paste and begin rubbing it into the floor. It darkens the surface at first, then dries to a clean matte finish. The natron deodorizes, allegedly, and the crocodile dung. Well, historians still argue whether it was meant to disinfect, mask smells, or simply appease the crocodile god Sobek, who, awkwardly, is both revered and feared. Sobek is a creature of contradictions. On one hand, he's a symbol of fertility and strength. On the other, he's a literal river monster. Yet somehow, his excrement ends up in your cleaning routine. You don't question it too much. It's just what people do. The neighbors use it too. Probably. What's strange is how normal it all feels. You hum a little as you scrub, the familiar rhythm of movement taking over. A fly buzzes by, too slow to escape the slap of your cloth. You shoo a curious cat away from the bowl of paste. She licks her paw and looks offended. By mid-morning, the sun is climbing, and your little house is beginning to roast. You pause, stretch, and drink water from a ceramic jug wrapped in damp linen to keep it cool. You sit on a low stool near the door, listening to the sounds of other households doing the same work. The neighbor's broom scratches rhythmically. A child yells. Someone sneezes. Twice. You think about the differences in cleanliness across the classes. Wealthier homes, those of nobles or priests, have hired staff for all this. They probably don't even know what crocodile dung smells like. You, on the other hand, are practically a connoisseur. Sometimes you wonder, do people in other lands clean like this? Are they also mixing sacred animal droppings with desert salts and calling it tidy? Or is this one of those uniquely Egyptian things, like shaving off your eyebrows when your cat dies? As you resume scrubbing, you notice the light slanting through the doorway, catching on the newly polished floor. It gleams faintly. For now, the house is clean, or at least less dusty than it was. You smile, sit back, and wipe your hands on your tunic. The paste pot goes back on the shelf. The flies return, of course. They always do. But for this brief moment, you've beaten the dust. You duck through the low doorway into your freshly swept house, pausing just long enough to slap a sleepy lizard off the wall before it plops into the water jug again. Inside, the air is thick with warmth, but you're used to that. What you're not used to, what you never get used to, is the daily struggle to keep this little mud brick haven from disintegrating into sand and sweat. Your home, like most in your Nile-side village, is built from adobe bricks, sun-dried chunks of mud and straw, mixed by hand, and laid in place with the rhythmic slap of wet palms. The walls are uneven, flaking here and there, and you've patched them so many times you've started naming the larger repairs. That corner by the cooking area, that's Crumbly Steve. He's a recurring problem. The roof is flat, made of palm logs laid side by side, with reed mats and more mud layered on top to form a sort of baked crust. It's not waterproof. Rain is rare. But when it comes, it absolutely hates roofs. Still, the flat top makes for a great place to dry fish or nap when the indoor heat gets overwhelming. You've even got a small jar of pickled onions aging up there right now. They're terrible, but they're your terrible. The interior of the house is one main room, with low benches for sitting or sleeping, a shrine tucked into a niche with some faded votive figures, and a cooking space that radiates the scent of garlic and onions no matter how often you clean it. There's a storage room, off to one side, full of baskets and clay pots, and at least one mummified mouse you haven't worked up the courage to remove yet. Every home has its gremlin. Your floors aren't really floors in the modern sense. They're just packed earth, polished smooth over time by bare feet and sweeping. There are no carpets, though you've laid a woven mat near the shrine, partly for reverence, mostly because it hides a suspicious-looking crack in the clay. Every surface in the house collects dust like it's going out of style. Even the walls seem to sweat sand. You wonder sometimes if the desert is actively trying to reclaim its territory, grain by grain. And if the dust wasn't bad enough, you've also got soot from the cooking fire, grease from oil lamps, and the ever-present smell of dried fish. That smell. Let's talk about it. No matter how tightly you seal your clay pots, no matter how often you rinse your drying racks, the scent lingers. A blend of brine, smoke, and something that can only be described as angry eel. It wafts into your linens, settles into the walls, and seems to follow you down the street like a judgmental ghost. To combat the stench, you've developed a system. You burn juniper sprigs in the doorway in the evening. You sprinkle dried mint near the shrine, mostly because you like the way it looks. And once a week, you paint a paste of natron, ground ash, and, yes, crocodile dung along the lower portions of your walls. It's like divine Febreze, if Febreze were gritty and also poop. Historians still argue whether this paste was genuinely antimicrobial, or if people just assumed that anything pungent and sacred had to be effective. The natron definitely helps. It draws out moisture and smells, and even has some mild antiseptic properties. As for the dung, let's just say that ancient Egypt's cleanliness methods might not pass a modern health inspection, but they had their logic. Now, let's not forget the pest angle. Your home is a war zone for tiny intruders. You've got ants that march like they're late for war, lizards that lounge in doorways, and the occasional scorpion that makes you reconsider sleeping on the floor. That's where the layout of your home helps. It's relatively uncluttered, so you can see what's lurking. You keep your food in hanging baskets when you can. It doesn't stop the flies, but it makes you feel like you tried. And at night, you tuck your bedroll in tightly, if not to keep pests out, then at least to give them a good challenge. Your furnishings are minimal, but functional. A few clay jars stacked in the corner hold flour, lentils, and something vaguely pickled. There's a low wooden stool near the doorway, which doubles as a stepping block for reaching high shelves and a makeshift dinner table when needed. You once sat on it while brushing dung paste into the cracks of the floor and nearly lost your balance, prompting your neighbor to yell, "Don't die scrubbing," across the alley. Good advice. The social element of housework can't be overstated. As much as you curse the dust and sigh over the endless scrubbing, there's comfort in the rhythm of it. You hear your neighbors doing the same. The sweep sweep thump of brooms, the creak of roof baskets being open, the occasional splash of water sloshed against hot clay. It's a chorus of labor, a dusty harmony of daily survival. And it bonds you all together in ways that running water never could. When someone's floor starts to crack or their walls crumble, help arrives not with tools, but with hands, chatter, and a bowl of that ever-versatile dung paste. And let's be honest, there's a little competition too. You've definitely peeked into a neighbor's house to judge their sweeping technique or make mental notes about who's slacking on shrine dusting. It's petty, it's human, and it makes this ancient house feel strangely modern. So you adjust your headscarf, slap some more paste onto a crack in the wall, and nod in satisfaction. Your house may be small, dusty, and mildly compost-scented, but it's yours. And for another hot, chaotic, sand-blasted day, it's clean, by ancient Egyptian standards anyway. You're back outside now, crouched near your modest garden plot, squinting against the sun as you dig a shallow channel with a wooden hoe. It's time to guide a trickle of Nile water toward your vegetables. Mostly leeks, onions, and maybe a few beans that haven't given up hope yet. This tiny patch of life, this rectangle of stubborn greenery, is your pride and joy. Irrigation is no casual affair. If you miss the watering window, the desert wins, and the desert always wants to win. The Nile floods generously during Akhet, the inundation season, but now it's Puree, the growing season, and that means coaxing every drop of water through hand-dug canals, praying your neighbors upstream don't get greedy. As you guide the water with your feet and mutter encouragement to your wilting onions, a fly lands on your ear. You swipe at it lazily. It's too hot to care. Besides, the real nuisance isn't the insects. It's the sludge that sneaks in with the water. Mud, rot, and occasionally something worse. Something like crocodile dung. Yes, again with the crocodile dung. But this time, you're not using it. You're dodging it. You see, crocodiles roam the Nile freely, especially near the reeds, and they do their business in the very same water you drink, bathe in, and irrigate with. This means, whether you like it or not, you're getting microdoses of Nile croc every day. So, in a moment of ancient logic or desperation, someone, probably a very sweaty farmer, had the idea to flip the script. If crocodile dung was going to invade your life, why not use it? The result? A belief, not entirely unshared by modern fringe researchers, that certain properties in crocodile waste were actually beneficial. People began applying it to wounds, mixing it with ashes to clean clothes, and yes, using it as part of household sanitation. If you're already knee-deep in Nile sludge, why not? Historians still argue whether this belief was practical, spiritual, or both. Was it trial and error survival science? Was it a way to honor Sobek, the crocodile god, by not wasting his sacred byproduct? Or was it, quite simply, a matter of this stinks less than the alternative? You can't say for sure, but what you do know is that downriver from here, your cousin claims to have used dung paste to polish her laundry stones and swears it left them smoother and easier to use. You raised an eyebrow at that, but didn't argue. Not after seeing her laundry stones. They did gleam suspiciously. Back in your garden, you pause to inspect a clay vessel that's been buried halfway in the earth near your cucumber vines. It's an old trick. Fill the pot with water, plug the top with a rag, and the moisture seeps slowly into the soil. Low-tech irrigation. And here's the kicker. You've lined the pot with a thin smear of crocodile dung mixed with chalk and natron, supposedly to discourage insects and algae. Does it work? You're not entirely sure. But it makes the pot smell like responsibility, so that's something. You stand, stretch, and look around. Your neighbor is out, pouring grayish water from her laundry basin into a channel that leads straight to her date palms. The clothes she's just washed, linen tunics and triangular loincloths, flap in the dry breeze. You notice the faint pinkish streaks along the hems. Clay, probably. Or, more likely, residue from the cleansing paste they all share in this part of town. Natron, ash, and you know what. Let's talk about that paste again. This time from the laundry angle. Clothing maintenance in ancient Egypt is a sweaty, hands-on, communal effort. You don't toss garments into a river and hope for the best. No. You boil water in blackened clay pots, add handfuls of natron for softening, and then scrub linen on flat stones until your shoulders scream. Some families even add powdered limestone for extra abrasion. And for stains, especially the oily kind from cooking or sweat, it's not uncommon to mix in a pinch of dung paste. The enzymes are believed to break down grime, much like certain modern soaps. It doesn't smell great, but neither do you after walking half a mile in the sun. Interestingly, not all dung was created equal. Crocodile dung was considered high status, symbolically potent, rare in dry form, and linked to the divine. Donkey dung? That's for emergencies. Cow dung? That's for fuel. But croc dung? That's the good stuff. Of course, none of this happens in a vacuum. Cleaning, whether it's your clothes, your floor, or your sacred statues, has ritual implications. You don't just wash to look nice. You wash to remove isfet, or chaos. Filth isn't just dirt. It's a kind of spiritual disorder. That's why temple priests bathe multiple times a day, and why offerings to the gods are always presented spotless. So when you scrub your garden tools with a dung-based paste, you're not just protecting your crops, you're reestablishing harmony. Or at least that's what your grandmother used to say before flinging crocodile droppings at snakes in the tool shed. You finish watering? Check the vines one more time for pests. Hello again, caterpillars. And carry your hoe back toward the house. Along the way, you pass a young boy chasing a chicken with a feather duster made from bundled reeds. He's laughing. The chicken, not so much. And just as you reach your door, you notice a fresh smear of something on your threshold. Not mud, not paint. You sigh. Someone's been borrowing your cleaning paste again. You're already down on one knee, finger to the doorway, inspecting the smudge. It's still damp, too fresh to be anything that's just drifted in. You touch it, hesitantly, and bring your fingers close to your nose. Yep, that's definitely your cleaning paste. The familiar bouquet hits you. Earthy clay, astringent natron, and just a whisper of fermented Nile monster. Crocodile dung, unmistakably. You don't mind the borrowing so much. In fact, it's almost a compliment. People borrow what works. But a little warning next time wouldn't hurt. Or at least a thank you clay shard. You scrape the excess with a reed blade, then pause to appreciate the texture. You mixed this batch yourself last week, during the full moon, the same way your aunt taught you, grinding the dry dung into powder with limestone chips, then blending it with natron, crushed barley straw, and a trickle of lamp oil for spreadability. You heated it just enough to make the mix pliable without cooking the scent completely out. That scent, as much as you complain about it, is part of the charm. Or the magic. Maybe both. Now, the threshold. Thresholds in ancient Egypt aren't just dusty strips of clay between inside and outside. They're sacred liminal spaces, the border between safety and the chaotic outdoors, between your world and the unpredictable one. A clean threshold is a warding line. You keep it clear of leaves, sand, footprints, and especially bad energy. And the cleaning paste isn't just about sanitation, it's protection. You smooth a fresh layer over the step with a flat stick. The grainy mixture fills the hairline cracks and makes a satisfying schlick as it spreads. As you work, your mind drifts back to something your cousin once said after too much date wine. The crocodile doesn't just eat our enemies, he keeps our homes tidy. You'd laughed, but maybe she had a point. Sobek, the crocodile god, wasn't just a terrifying river predator. He was a deity of strength, fertility, and yes, protection. So if his sacred byproduct helped keep your home in balance, why not embrace it? Historians still argue whether crocodile dung held real protective value, or if its use was mostly symbolic. Maybe it repelled insects. Maybe the ammonia-like compounds killed bacteria. Maybe it just made people think it was doing all that, and that was enough. Whatever the case, it's now as routine as sweeping. You smear, let it dry, and flick away the flakes every few days. You step back and admire your work. The threshold glistens slightly in the morning light, a proud, muddy badge of responsible home ownership. Inside, the day's cleaning resumes. You start with the ceiling. You wouldn't think a thatched roof could get dusty, but you'd be wrong. Bits of reed fall constantly, along with the occasional beetle corpse. Using a bent palm frond, you sweep gently between the beams, careful not to knock loose the dried gourd hanging from the rafters. That gourd holds powdered galena, which you use for eye makeup, and also, supposedly, to ward off evil spirits, or at least attract compliments. You wipe down the shelves next. They're simple planks fitted into niches in the wall, holding everything from votive figurines to spare spindle whorls. You dip a rag into a clay basin of herbal water, infused with crushed coriander seeds and a touch of vinegar, and wipe away the week's grime. In corners where mold threatens to form, you add a dab of your favorite paste. It dries to a crust that smells faintly of a swampy god and tells bacteria, not today. As you scrub, your neighbor calls through the window. She's lost her broom again and wants to borrow yours. You sigh, set down your reed rag, and poke your head outside to hand it off. She promises to return it by sunset and not to use it on anything weird this time. That promise is worth about as much as a dried fig. When you turn back inside, a gust of dry air swirls up a little storm of dust. You curse mildly under your breath, then stop yourself. Chaos is just part of the rhythm. Clean, dust, clean again. You begin humming a tune your mother used to sing while scrubbing amphorae. It sounds like patience and smells faintly of mint and manure. Next, the hearth area. The cooking nook is its own ecosystem. You kneel to sweep ashes from beneath the clay stove, then brush the soot off the back wall with a feather whisk. There's a fine art to this. You don't want to scatter the soot into your face, nor do you want to dislodge the thin protective coating of dung paste that lines the wall behind the stove. That's right. Even here, crocodile dung makes an appearance. It serves a dual purpose in the hearth. First, as a kind of fire retardant. It resists catching flame better than untreated clay. Second, it creates a smooth surface that's easy to reapply and helps mask the odors of cooking fish and roasting onions. If you've ever smelled 3-day-old lentils simmered in goat fat, you know how important this is. You take a moment to check the firewood supply. Almost out. You'll need to gather more reeds from the riverbank later, unless you want to trade a jar of preserved garlic for some scraps. You briefly weigh the value of garlic versus leg pain. It's a close call. And finally, you address the floor again. Not a full re-sweep, just a touch-up. You flick a few stray seeds into the hearth ashes, where they'll burn away harmlessly, and give the floor one more pass with your broom's blunt end to pack it tight. You sit back on your heels, arms dusty, legs sore, and smile. The house smells earthy, herbal, faintly pungent, but clean. Not pristine, not sterile, but clean in a lived-in, sacred space kind of way. Just as you lean against the wall to rest, a small clump of dried dung paste falls from the ceiling and lands in your lap. You sigh. Chaos never sleeps. You're sitting in the middle of your freshly cleaned home, feeling the way you always do after a deep scrub, equal parts accomplished and slightly gross. The smell of crocodile dung clings faintly to your hands, despite the 3 rinses in vinegar water. It's not offensive anymore, just familiar, like a funky old uncle who insists on hugging you too long. But your cleaning efforts aren't finished yet, not until you tackle the jars. In ancient Egypt, storage jars are everything. They hold grains, beer, pickled vegetables, sacred ointments, and, most crucially, they keep the flies out of your hard-earned food. You shuffle over to your pantry niche and lift the lid off your largest vessel. A tangy, sour-sweet scent drifts up. Date beer. You wrinkle your nose and give it a quick sniff test. Still good. Barely. You run a finger along the rim and feel the familiar crust of dried paste there. That's your homemade sealing agent. A blend of mud, chopped straw, beeswax, and, surprise, just a little crocodile dung. The mixture dries to a thick plug that discourages insects and supposedly masks the scent from mice and other unwanted visitors. Historians still argue whether this was an actual insect repellent or simply a byproduct of limited resources and a strong stomach. Either way, you're not taking chances. You carefully scrape off the old seal and set to work mixing a fresh batch. You've got your tools ready: a cracked alabaster bowl, a smooth pestle, and a scoop of aged dung you've kept stored in a linen pouch under the stairs. It's dry and crumbly now, almost like spiced chalk. You add in some softened beeswax, a splash of linseed oil, and mix until the consistency is thick enough to slap onto the jar mouth like a savory icing. The scent intensifies as the wax warms under your fingers. You try not to think too hard about it. Instead, you focus on the texture. Gritty, but with enough body to form a good seal. As you press the mixture into place and smooth it with the back of a knife, you feel oddly satisfied. There's a tactile comfort in doing things the old way, even when the old way involves crocodile excrement. And there's an art to this. You want the seal thick enough to be effective, but thin enough to peel off later without cracking the jar. You hum softly to yourself as you work, a tune passed down from your grandfather, who always claimed the right music kept the paste from drying too fast. It's probably nonsense, but you hum anyway. With the jars sealed, your mind shifts to the walls. The painted plaster along your home's interior is more than decoration. It's your protection against spirits, dust, and the jealous gaze of nosy neighbors. Bright colors fade fast in this heat, but you're determined to keep the blue lotus motif above the doorway vibrant. First, you inspect the plaster. There are a few new cracks, some moisture damage near the corner, and, oh, wonderful, a smear of something sticky that might be from your neighbor's toddler, or from your own late-night snack. You try not to assign blame. Time to patch. You reach for your favorite repair compound, a mix of fine sand, powdered limestone, honey, and, you guessed it, a dash of crocodile dung. The honey helps bind it. The dung provides texture and was, according to your grandmother, what scared the bad dreams away. Whether that's because of its scent or symbolic weight is still up for debate. You kneel by the wall, apply the paste with a flat piece of shell, and whisper the protective phrases your mother taught you. Not spells exactly, just words to make the act feel right. Hold fast, stay clean, keep chaos outside. You repeat it under your breath as you smooth the plaster, letting your mind wander to the idea that cleanliness, in this world, is never just physical, it's spiritual. And in this context, a smear of dung can be as holy as a carved amulet. maybe even more so. Amulets break, but your cleaning paste? That sticks. And it's not just walls or jars or thresholds. Sometimes you use your sacred goo to patch sandals. The fiber straps on your left shoe have frayed again, so you dip them in a bowl of thickened paste, bind them with a length of twine, and set them out to dry in the sun. It'll harden into a surprisingly durable fix. Not glamorous, but functional. Kind of like you. You chuckle to yourself. Life in ancient Egypt isn't about staying spotless. It's about constant negotiation with dirt, dust, bugs, and the subtle forces that whisper through your home when you forget to sweep under the offering shelf. Speaking of which, you glance at the corner where your small altar rests. 2 carved figures, a dish of dried flowers, and a cup of sour milk. You probably should replace that. The flies already have. You swap out the milk, rearrange the offering stones, and sweep the base of the altar carefully. A few black smudges remain where soot and time have stained the clay. You dab a bit of your cleaning paste on a reed swab and scrub gently until the worst of it lifts. The dung's slightly abrasive quality makes it perfect for stubborn grime. You whisper thanks to Sobek, not for the dung, but for the patience. Before you finish, you light a small oil lamp. The flame flickers against the walls, reflecting off the drying paste with a gentle sheen. For a moment, everything smells like beeswax and herbs. The crocodile undertone fades into the background, or maybe you've just stopped noticing. You settle into a low stool, stretch out your legs, and let out a long, slow breath. Clean jars, smooth walls, repaired shoes, blessed threshold. All thanks, in some small, strange way, to the omnipresent digestive generosity of the Nile's most terrifying resident. The afternoon sun begins to slide down the sky, casting long golden shafts of light across the floor of your home. The heat hasn't broken yet, but it's softening, enough that the breeze from the river carries a faint freshness with it. You close your eyes for a moment, listening. You can hear the ripple of water, the occasional call of a heron, and the rhythmic creak of someone's laundry paddle further down the bank. Time for the floors. You take one last sip from your ceramic cup. Lukewarm barley tea with a sprig of mint, and stand with a small groan. Your joints protest, but you've still got energy. Maybe it's the satisfaction of the ritual, or maybe you're just slightly high on vinegar fumes. Either way, the main floor needs a final pass. In wealthier households, floors might be stone, sometimes inlaid with painted tiles, but yours is traditional, smoothed, packed earth, reinforced with layers of clay and straw. Over time, it settles into a firm, leathery surface. It's surprisingly elegant, really. Cool in summer, warm in winter, and when sealed properly, easy to clean. And yes, sealed again with the same stuff that seems to show up everywhere in your life. Crocodile dung paste. But this time, you're going fancy. You've saved a particularly dry batch, ground into the finest powder, mixed with sifted ash from burnt papyrus scraps, and blended into a rich, dark polish. A pinch of myrrh resin adds just a touch of fragrance, not enough to disguise the base note entirely, but enough to make the overall effect feel intentional. You dip a cloth into the bowl and begin working the polish across the floor in wide circular strokes. It glides surprisingly well, each motion smoothing out the scuffs of daily life. Bare feet, dropped tools, spilled lentils. As you work, you imagine what it must have been like in the homes of palace scribes or temple stewards, where servants did this sort of thing under torchlight, speaking in hushed tones so as not to disturb the master's sleep. But you clean your own floor, And honestly, you'd probably do a better job than any servant who wasn't intimately familiar with the particular stubbornness of the soil in this part of the village. Local dirt has attitude. Halfway through, you stop and stretch your back. Your hands are sticky and tinged slightly green, thanks to the dung, no doubt, but your floor is shining. It reflects the light like polished leather. That's when the children run in. Well, not all the way in. They've been warned. But they skid to a halt at your doorway, eyes wide, noses wrinkling dramatically. "You're using that stuff again?" The smallest one squeaks. You give them a slow nod and hold up the cloth like a badge of honor. "Only the finest," you say. "Hand harvested from the blessed beasts of the Nile." They shriek in exaggerated horror and bolt away down the alley, their laughter trailing behind them. You chuckle, but there's a flicker of pride too. Let them laugh. You know the value of tradition. And besides, kids are fickle. Give it a few years, and they'll be using the same recipe to polish their own thresholds. Historians still argue whether the use of crocodile dung in domestic cleaning rituals was widespread or limited to certain regions. Some think it was tied to worship practices, others to practical needs like pest control. There's even debate over whether households made the paste themselves or bought it from traveling merchants who specialized in such unsavory goods. You like the idea of a merchant. Picture it: a cart rattling down the dusty road, pulled by a stubborn donkey, loaded with ceramic pots sealed with reed caps. The man behind the cart wears a wide hat and smells faintly of the river. He offers a sample, only the freshest, and demonstrates the paste's insect-repelling properties by smearing some on his arm and letting a beetle run across it. No bites. The crowd oohs. Maybe that's just a fantasy, but it's a good one. As you finish the last section of floor, you pause to let it dry. The room smells, well, it smells ancient, like earth, effort, and something vaguely sacrificial. You don't mind. It feels lived in, deeply so. Like every molecule of the house remembers who you are and what you've done here. To pass the drying time, you step outside and rinse your hands at the communal basin. The cool water stings your cracked knuckles, but in a satisfying way. You glance toward the river, where a crocodile suns itself on the bank, completely indifferent to your admiration. "Thanks," you murmur. He doesn't respond, obviously, but you like to imagine he gives the slightest nod. You return inside and admire your work. The floor has dried to a warm, subtle gloss. It's not flashy, but it glows in the fading sunlight. You can practically hear it whispering, "I am clean. I am safe. You may now exhale." As you settle back onto your stool, a lazy gnat drifts through the window and buzzes around your head. You swat half-heartedly, then reach for a tiny dish of your signature paste, smear a bit onto the windowsill, and wait. Sure enough, the gnat veers off, offended by the smell, or perhaps awed by the ancestral power of your housekeeping. There's a moment of perfect stillness, and then a faint plop as something drops from the ceiling into your cooling tea. You don't even flinch. Some days, the dung wins. But most days, you win. The sun has dipped below the horizon now, casting long blue shadows through the narrow alleys of your village. You move by lamplight, which flickers golden against the freshly polished floor. The scent of beeswax mingles with that ever-present tang of, well, crocodile. Somehow, it's comforting, familiar, homey even, like that odd smell in your grandmother's kitchen that never made sense until you missed it. Tonight, you're preparing for guests. Not a grand affair, just your cousin from downriver and her friend, the one with the suspiciously perfect teeth. You want things to be tidy, of course, but there's also an unspoken competition when it comes to domestic pride. Her house may have imported incense from Punt, but does her doorway glisten with sacred sealant? You doubt it. Your attention turns now to the entryway. The threshold stone, worn from years of sandals and hurried feet, has gathered another day's worth of dust. And worse, a few mysterious streaks that suggest someone stepped through with fish juice on their shoes. You sigh. Time to fetch your threshold brush. It's a humble tool. Bundles of stiff reeds bound with linen cord, but with just the right firmness to scrub between the etched hieroglyphs that mark your home's welcome stone. You kneel and begin brushing in practiced, rhythmic motions. Then, from your bowl of thickened cleaner, today's blend, ash, vinegar, lavender oil, and of course, a pinch of crocodile dung, you dab a soft linen and begin rubbing it in. The dung serves a dual purpose here. Practical. Its ammonia content discourages ants, and spiritual. Egyptians believed thresholds were liminal spaces, and liminal spaces attracted attention, both mortal and divine. Sobek, being a god of boundaries, river to land, danger to safety, was sometimes honored with tiny offerings right at the doorway. What better way to acknowledge him than cleaning with his very essence? Historians still debate whether these practices were universal or regional. Some argue they were localized to Sobek cults around the Fayum. Others believe it was simply what was available. Either way, you've inherited the habit, and you're not about to stop. As you work, you hum. It's the same tune your mother used, something slow and looping. It matches the rhythm of your arm. Brush, rub, polish. Brush, rub, polish. Then, a detail catches your eye. A faint fingerprint pressed into the corner of the threshold, barely visible unless you kneel just right. You smile. It's your little cousin's. He was here last week, after all, scooting beetles with a spoon and telling stories about crocodiles with golden teeth. You leave the print, not out of sentiment, but because you secretly believe it brings luck. A kind of familial signature on the house. Besides, you'll clean it next week. Standing again, your back cracks. The brush has worn down a little. You'll need to rebind it soon. Maybe tomorrow. But for now, the doorway shines. Clean, sacred, and slightly pungent. Inside, your home glows in the lamplight. The walls are patched, the jars sealed, the floor buffed. Even your sandals, propped neatly near the doorway, have been reinforced with a tiny daub of crocodile paste at the heel. You've done well today. Still, there's one more task. You retrieve a woven fan from the wall and begin gently wafting the air. It's more symbolic than useful, meant to coax any lingering spirits toward the door. You've heard elders say that houses, like people, need a good exhale after a cleaning. A ritual sigh. You imagine your home releasing its breath, the stale bits floating out into the evening air, replaced by calm, renewed silence. And yet, even in this peace, you sense something more. Maybe it's the residue of old prayers. Maybe it's the certainty that 1,000 years from now, someone will find a sealed jar, scrape off the crust, and wrinkle their nose in baffled respect. Maybe they'll even laugh, but they'll know someone lived here. Someone who scrubbed and patched and polished. Someone who took dung, ash, oil, and effort, and built something beautiful with it. You set down the fan. Outside, the first stars begin to wink through the dusk. Inside, your home feels still and sacred, not museum perfect, just real, alive with effort, and a hint of ammonia. And in this moment, standing barefoot on a floor that's part riverbank, part temple, you feel deeply, sleepily proud. The stars outside have multiplied, scattering across the sky like spilled lentils. Somewhere beyond the village, a jackal calls, long and low, and you smile. Anubis is clocking in for the night shift. Inside your now clean home, the air is soft and still. You've lit a second lamp, and the gentle flicker plays across the jars, the polished doorway, the tidied corners. The crocodile dung polish has settled into the floor's grain, giving off a slightly herbal tang beneath the wax and oil. You've gotten used to it. You might even miss it when you travel. Tonight, your attention turns to the sleeping area. It's not large, just a raised platform of clay and woven reeds, but it's yours. The mat atop it is layered with palm fiber padding, smoothed carefully earlier. Still, the sleeping space must be purified, as always. And in this house, purification is more than sweeping. You retrieve your sleep time mixture. In a small carved bowl rests a blend of powdered herbs, chamomile, dried lotus petals, and the faintest pinch of, yes, dung ash. Not raw, mind you. This has been burnt, sifted, and aged into something resembling a dusty gray incense. You scatter it in small pinches across the platform, murmuring softly under your breath. Not spells exactly, more like verbal habits passed down. For rest, for peace, for closed eyes and safe dreams. Some scholars today debate whether the Egyptians genuinely used dung-based powders in domestic rituals, or whether these references are metaphorical, some kind of coded language for decay and renewal. But when you shake the ash from your fingers, you don't think in metaphors. You think in sleep. You move to the walls. They're simple mud brick, sealed with a layer of whitewash and reinforced with wooden beams. You inspect the corners for signs of unwanted guests, spiders, ants, or the occasional fearless gecko. Tonight, only a spider. You nod at her. She's earned her place. In the corner of the room sits a bundle of dried crocodile scales, gifted long ago by a cousin who worked in temple maintenance. They're not just souvenirs. Burned in small amounts, they're said to protect sleepers from nightmares, especially the kind that slither. You break off a sliver and place it on the small hearthstone near your bed. When the time comes, you'll light it with a taper. And yes, the smell is unique. Like charred leather left too long in a papyrus library. But you've learned to associate it with safety. The crocodile watching over you, even in sleep. It's odd, really. How much of your nighttime comfort is built around an animal most people would run screaming from? But Egyptians have always been pragmatic. If something's powerful, you find a way to live with it, even if it growls. You remember stories told by elders, how crocodile-shaped amulets were placed beneath pillows, how Sobek was invoked not just for strength, but for fertility and calm waters. Some even say he guided lost souls through dreams, snapping at demons who wandered too close. Historians, as always, argue. Was this worship universal? Was Sobek seen as friend, or fearsome foe, or both? You don't need the answer. You just light the taper and let the sliver catch fire. It smolders, releasing a curl of strange, resinous smoke. You wave it toward the sleeping platform and murmur thanks. Not to Sobek specifically, but to whatever part of the world keeps you safe at night. You sit for a moment on the edge of the bed, letting the warmth of the hearthstone kiss your legs. The house feels extra still after cleaning, like even the walls are tucking themselves in. You reach for your final ritual, the oil jar. Inside is a sleepy time blend of moringa oil, crushed blue lotus, and, you guessed it, a touch of dung ash. You dab it on your temples, your wrists, the tops of your feet. The scent is mild, woody, with a ghost of Nile mud and citrus. And somehow, this combination calms you every time, like your body recognizes it as a signal. We're done for the day. Let's stop thinking now. You lie back, letting the mat creak beneath your weight. The lamp flickers its way lower, casting slow shadows across the ceiling. Your fingers trace idle patterns on the reeds as your breath slows. Your eyelids begin to droop. And just before you surrender to sleep, you imagine the great Sobek, lounging on a stone slab beside your bed, half asleep himself, watching, grumbling occasionally, smelling faintly of wet riverbank and sacred rot. You feel oddly protected, because really, what better bodyguard could there be than a god with scales? The night deepens, and the temperature drops enough for you to pull the edge of your blanket a little higher. The air smells of damp earth, but there's still a faint trace of the pungent mixture you used to polish the floor. It lingers, comforting, as though your whole home is wrapped in the embrace of its own history. Just the right kind of smell to lull someone into a peaceful sleep. Outside, the sounds of the village have shifted. The workers who spent the day collecting papyrus have retired to their homes, leaving only the occasional clink of pottery or the murmur of a family settling in for the night. There's a soft breeze from the Nile, rustling through the reeds. It's all so peaceful, you could almost forget the jagged, toothy creatures that lurk below its waters. But you know better, and Sobek knows better. Your eyes flutter closed, but sleep doesn't take you immediately. Instead, your mind wanders to those creatures, the crocodiles. You can't help but marvel at them, predators by nature, with an old, ruthless sense of timing. Their jaws are built to clamp shut with unyielding strength, their eyes like slits, always half closed in that eternal watchfulness. The Egyptians had a complicated relationship with these beasts. The very thing that made the crocodile dangerous, its primal ferocity, was the same quality that inspired reverence, perhaps even admiration. After all, Sobek wasn't just a god of chaos and power, he was also a protector. The crocodile was not just an enemy of the unwary traveler, it was also a sacred guardian of boundaries, sometimes fierce, always vigilant. Historians still debate the full scope of Sobek's role in daily life. While some scholars point to his associations with fertility and water, others claim he was equally connected to creation myths. Was he a divine creature, born from the primal waters? Did he truly control the floodwaters of the Nile, or was that a later invention? Whatever the case, his importance in the Egyptian worldview was undeniable. Suddenly, the village sounds break your reverie, a distant cry. It's not the call of a crocodile, though it could be mistaken for one in the right conditions. It's a human cry, filled with urgency and fear. You sit up, heart racing. It's just a jackal, you tell yourself. But even so, your muscles tense, and for a moment, you wonder how many of the ancient practices, like the use of crocodile dung, came from the need to ward off such dangers. Not just from the creatures themselves, but from the wildness that lurks in the dark. Crocodile dung wasn't just for floors or doorways. It was about creating a barrier against the unpredictable, the untamable. You take a deep breath and push the thought from your mind. You're safe here. Inside these walls, with Sobek's protection, you can afford to relax. Your body tells you as much, your limbs heavy with sleep. You stretch, Then let your body sink into the mattress, the warmth of your blankets cocooning you like the river's flow. The scent of the dung paste has faded a little, but you can still detect its subtle fragrance. As you drift, your last waking thought is a curious one. How much of the world you live in was shaped by rituals like this? By the need for protection, for safety, for order in the chaos of the natural world? The crocodiles that the ancient Egyptians feared and revered were not merely symbols. They were real, flesh and bone reminders of the ever-present danger that lurked just beneath the surface. The last thing you remember before you slip fully into sleep is the thought of the river's dark waters, silent and unmoving, beneath the calm surface of the night. And beneath those waters, crocodiles with their endless, watchful eyes. Historians argue over how ancient Egyptians truly viewed the balance between chaos and order. But one thing is certain: they were always aware of the power and presence of the wild world around them. That power was in the air, in the earth, and in the very dung that sealed their floors and protected their doorways. And now, as sleep pulls you under, you feel the weight of that ancient connection, that delicate balance settling gently into your dreams. The first rays of light seep in, soft and golden. You wake to the smell of the earth, moist, cool, like the last trace of the night. It's early, too early to rise, but you've always been a light sleeper. The early morning stillness is one of your favorite times. The house feels like it's still holding on to sleep, every corner and reed-lined wall quiet and unmoving. You roll over, eyes still heavy with slumber, and your hand brushes against the pillow, where it meets something unexpected. A small bundle, wrapped tightly in linen. Curious, you reach for it, pulling it closer. When you unwrap it, a slight smile spreads across your face. It's a gift, a small offering from your cousin. Inside, nestled carefully in the folds of fabric, is a piece of crocodile leather. It's not just any leather. It's soft, supple, and still faintly scented with the strange, earthy smell of the creature. You remember the moment your cousin had mentioned she'd come across it on a trip to the Fayum, a region known for its heavy worship of Sobek. She'd promised she would bring you something special, a memento from a land where crocodiles were not only feared, but adored. It's a token, a link between the wild and the human, a piece of the eternal connection Egyptians believed to exist between the divine and the everyday. You wonder briefly what the crocodile meant to her, to anyone who came into contact with such creatures. Was it simply the reality of living beside something so fierce? Or was there something deeper, a kind of respect ingrained in every interaction with the Nile's scaly inhabitants? Perhaps it's not just the crocodile that leaves its mark on people, but the necessity of being aware of its power. The Egyptians, with their careful observances, certainly recognize this duality, the predator and the protector. Historians argue over the exact symbolism of crocodiles in Egyptian society. Did the worship of Sobek extend only to those who lived near the Nile, or was it more widespread? Was Sobek seen as a god who safeguarded not only the waters and their inhabitants, but also the people themselves, helping them navigate the chaos of life? Or was he primarily feared as a protector of the wild, a force beyond human control? One thing is certain, though: the crocodile and its sacred association were never far from the minds of those who lived in the Nile Valley. It wasn't just about using the animal's dung for purification. It was about understanding its place in the cosmos, where it symbolized both creation and destruction, power and protection, danger and safety. As you hold the small gift, You imagine how the leather would look wrapped around the handle of a tool, or perhaps even sewn into a piece of clothing, something with just enough wildness to remind the wearer that the power of the crocodile still runs through the world. Not a guardian who keeps watch only at the edges of civilization, but a force that permeates, influencing even the smallest details of daily life. But for now, it's a token of respect, a nod to a god who embodied the very real tension between humanity and the natural world. A reminder that you're always, in some way, living within that tension. Whether you're cleaning with crocodile dung or simply resting your head on your pillow at night, the thought lingers as you stretch and sit up, preparing for the day ahead. The house is still, your home preserved in the warmth of the early morning. You begin your day as you always do, grateful, grounded, and with a quiet understanding that the world is a place of constant balance. There are forces beyond the human realm that shape your life, but you are safe here, within these walls. As you rise and prepare to face the day, you take one last look at the small leather token. It is more than just a reminder of the crocodile's power. It's a reminder that you, too, are part of the vast cycle of creation, destruction, and renewal. Just as the crocodile waits, patient and eternal, so too does the world around you. A place where rituals and symbols help to make sense of it all. With that thought in mind, you step out into the day, the cool morning air filling your lungs, and the weight of the world momentarily at peace. The day wears on, and as the sun climbs higher, the sounds of the village stir into activity. The distant chatter of vendors selling figs and dates, the rhythmic clink of stone against stone as workers grind wheat. Everything is alive with motion, yet still, in your home, there's a quietude, a peace that comes from having already done the work of the day. With the house now clean and the rituals of the night complete, you've settled into your usual midday routine. The moment you've been waiting for, rest. You take a seat near the open window, a small breeze pushing through the reeds outside, bringing with it the faint smell of fresh water. The sounds of the village outside fade into a soft hum as you let your gaze wander over the soft grain of the floorboards, the faint traces of the crocodile dung polish gleaming in the light. Though your mind has calmed, you cannot help but think back to that strange mixture, the combination of ash, dung, and oil. It's easy to dismiss the oddness of it when you've grown used to it, but it's also strangely profound. The Egyptians understood the power of nature's byproducts, not just in their physical uses, but in their spiritual importance. There is something humbling about using something as primal and untamed as crocodile dung to purify and protect your space. Historians still debate why dung was so prominent in Egyptian household rituals. The straightforward answer might be practicality. The fact that dung was readily available, especially from sacred animals like the crocodile, which was both revered and feared. The fact that it had symbolic weight added to its ritual use. Crocodiles were creatures of duality, both destructive and protective, and the dung itself carried that same duality. But there are other theories, too. Some scholars suggest that Egyptians believed dung had restorative powers, something that could counterbalance the forces of disorder and chaos. By using the dung of the crocodile, they might have been aligning themselves with Sobek's protection, invoking his power through even the smallest acts of daily life. The application of it wasn't just about cleanliness, but about inviting divine favor into the home. creating a sacred space where the natural world's forces were tamed and directed. Your thoughts drift back to the idea of protection, of balance, as the afternoon sun spills across the room. The use of crocodile dung was just one element in a much larger web of practices designed to keep chaos at bay. From the powerful protection of amulets and symbols to the careful placement of offerings and blessings, Egyptians were deeply attuned to the rhythms of the world around them. They understood that to live in harmony with the land, you had to acknowledge both the benevolent and dangerous forces that roamed it. You lean back against the wall, letting the steady hum of the village life outside merge with the quiet contentment within your home. A soft chuckle escapes your lips as you imagine just how strange this would sound to someone from a distant land. Crocodile dung, they would say, to keep away the spirits. And yet, in its simplicity, it was also deeply profound. It was a perfect blend of practicality and spirituality, a reminder that in the world of ancient Egypt, there was a divine purpose for even the most unlikely of materials. As you close your eyes, you picture Sobek, the crocodile god, his great jaws opening in a silent, eternal roar, watching over the Nile, over the land, and perhaps even over your little home. You imagine his watchful eyes turning back toward the river, knowing that he, like all gods, is a part of something far greater, something that weaves together the seen and unseen, the known and the unknown. Perhaps that's the greatest gift of living in this ancient world, the knowledge that everything, from the smallest grain of sand to the fiercest crocodile, plays a part in the grand, never-ending story. Everything, even the dung, has its place. Even the creatures that seem most frightening or distant have their role in this intricate dance of life. In the quiet stillness, the only sound is the soft rustle of the reeds outside, and you drift once more toward sleep. The image of Sobek fades, but the sense of balance, the gentle reminder of the protection he offers, remains with you as your eyelids close. The quiet stillness of the afternoon wraps around you like a warm blanket. The weight of sleep is creeping in, but not yet. Just a soft, soothing lull, like the calm before the flood. It's a strange thing, this feeling of stillness that can exist even in the busiest of places. Out there, the village hums with the daily rhythm of life, but inside your home, time seems to stretch, the minutes becoming long, measured breaths. As you let the moment settle over you, your thoughts drift again toward the ancient Egyptians and their use of crocodile dung. It's almost comical, isn't it? A material so earthy, so primal, yet so integral to their way of life. But perhaps that's what makes it so effective. The Egyptians understood the value of things that were both commonplace and extraordinary. Dung from a crocodile may seem absurd to us, but to them, it was a material with sacred power, grounded in the natural world. Perhaps it's not just the material itself, but the connection to the divine that gave it such significance. Sobek, the crocodile god, was a figure whose presence was felt in every aspect of life. Not just in the waters of the Nile, but in the rituals and practices of daily life. Crocodile dung wasn't just a cleaning agent. It was a tool that carried the weight of mythology and divine power. When they used it, Egyptians weren't simply scrubbing floors or protecting their homes. They were aligning themselves with Sobek's ancient primal force, a force that could protect them from the chaos of the world outside, as well as the hidden dangers that might lie in wait. As you sit there, In the cool silence of your home, the faint hum of the village still filtering through the window, you can almost feel the weight of ancient practices pressing against the air. In a sense, you're still connected to them. The rituals they carried out, the materials they used, all ripple through time. You wonder briefly how much of the world today still carries the traces of those ancient beliefs. Maybe it's the rituals we follow, the ways we try to keep the chaos at bay, that link us most closely to the past. But as your thoughts quiet, you're drawn back to the comforting stillness of the moment. The day is slowly fading into the evening, and with it, your senses dull slightly, the edges of your awareness softening as sleep presses in. You can hear the distant call of birds, the low murmur of the river winding through the reeds. The outside world feels like a dream itself, a distant, ever-present reminder of the forces that shape our lives. The connection to Sobek seems more immediate now, even if you can't quite touch it. The god is everywhere, in the water, in the earth, in the creatures that walk, crawl, and swim through the land. It's humbling, almost, to think of how much life and death has passed through these lands. How much history, both sacred and mundane, is wrapped up in every corner of this world, in every grain of sand, every drop of water, and yes, even in every trace of crocodile dung left to harden in the sun. You settle deeper into the pillow now, the day's work done, your body sinking slowly into rest. The weight of your thoughts fades, and as you relax, your mind wanders toward the sacred and the mundane. You can't help but feel a sense of awe at how the two intertwine in this world. The divine has always had a place in everyday life, whether in the rituals we follow or in the unexpected connections we make. Perhaps that's the truest magic of all, the ability to see the sacred in the ordinary, the divine in the day-to-day. It's a reminder that in every action, no matter how small, there's a thread that connects you to something much larger than yourself. Whether you're cleaning your home with crocodile dung or simply sitting by the window, watching the world go by, you're part of this eternal cycle. And as that thought settles in your mind, sleep finally takes you. The sounds of the village blur into a soft hum. The image of Sobek lingers, faded now, but comforting. The earth beneath you, the walls around you, and the world outside all feel wrapped in a gentle, protective embrace. The moon rises, pale and calm over the Nile, and you rest, knowing that, even in your dreams, the sacred balance continues to flow. It's deep into the night now. The air is cooler, and the sounds of the village have faded to near silence, broken only by the occasional splash of water from the river or the distant hoot of an owl tucked among the palm fronds. You stir slightly in your bed, just enough to shift, not enough to truly wake. The rush of dreams ebbs like the Nile at low tide. You're back in your home again. Only now, everything feels slightly stiller. The hearth is dark. The oils have burned low. But something lingers. Not unease. Just presence. You feel it. The lingering of all the rituals from the day, still held in the quiet heartbeat of the house. Crocodile dung or not, your home is yours, sealed and sacred. As you drift somewhere between sleep and waking, your mind wanders to the broader world outside the village. You think about the temples, not the grand ones with gold-tipped columns and towering obelisks, but the more modest ones in far-off nomes where the worship of Sobek takes on its own regional flavor. These smaller temples, tucked into forgotten corners of the kingdom, often housed live crocodiles, pampered and perfumed, draped in jewelry and kept in ponds like divine guests. The priests fed them honey cakes, rubbed oils on their scaly backs, and even gave them names, respected ones, spoken with reverence. These were not wild beasts here. They were incarnations of Sobek himself. The dung from such holy creatures would be considered even more potent, more spiritually pure, if such a thing can be imagined when speaking of feces. It wasn't a disgusting byproduct to be cast aside. It was sacred, collected, dried, and stored with care. Historians still argue whether these temple crocodiles were seen as literal gods or symbolic stand-ins. Some records suggest they were revered as living deities. Others hint at a more theatrical devotion, crocodiles treated with exaggerated care to impress the public and legitimize the temple's authority. But the truth probably lies somewhere in between, part pious, part performance. A little like most religion, if we're honest. You imagine the journey of someone tasked with collecting dung from a temple crocodile. Not a glamorous job, certainly, but one of responsibility. You'd walk barefoot through reed-choked water to the crocodile enclosure, keeping a respectful distance, and wait, patiently, reverently, for nature to take its course. And when it did, you wouldn't wince. You'd scoop up that steaming, divine gift like it was powdered gold. And back at the temple, it wouldn't go to waste. It might be mixed into poultices, burned in cleansing rituals, or sold in small quantities to wealthy households who couldn't access Sobek's personal pond, but wanted his protection just the same. Even among the gods, crocodile-based commerce thrived. You chuckle softly at the thought. Temple-sanctioned holy dung, parceled and traded like amulets or spices. But it makes sense. The line between sacred and profane has always been thin. In Egypt, thinner still. Everything was part of the eternal cycle. Birth, death, decay, rebirth. The dung wasn't a contradiction. It was an affirmation of that cycle. Proof that even the gods participated in the mess of life. As the breeze brushes across your face, bringing the scent of river mud and the faintest whiff of lilies, your mind slows. You picture the Nile again, not bustling with barges or loud with fishermen, but soft and silver under moonlight. Somewhere along its banks, a priest is kneeling in the silt, lighting incense, whispering prayers to a crocodile who may or may not be listening. And somewhere nearby, another priest is carefully collecting what the god has left behind. You smile again, sleep heavy on your eyes. There's something strangely reassuring in knowing that even in the most divine of spaces, someone still has to clean up. That gods, too, leave traces of their presence in very earthy ways, and that people, from the humblest villagers to the highest temple keepers, have always found ways to make meaning out of even the messiest parts of existence. The breeze softens, and your breath slows. There's nothing more to do tonight. Just the quiet reassurance that everything, every ritual, every scent, every strange and sacred act has brought you here, to this still moment. The deep blue of night thickens, and the soft edges of sleep are once again folding in around you. Yet your mind, ever gentle and curious, continues to wander through the shadows of ancient Egypt, retracing the peculiar harmony between the sacred and the daily grime. There's something satisfying in the thought that thousands of years ago, someone else was drifting off just like you are now, wrapped in the same mixture of moonlight, warm stone walls, and crocodile-infused cleanliness. Tonight, though, your thoughts take a slightly different turn. Not toward temples or rituals, but toward the ordinary lives of those who kept those sacred routines alive. specifically the women of ancient Egypt. From the towering structures of the city to the quiet clay homes along the Nile, it was often the women who wielded the dung-laced cleaning cloths and carried the wisdom of generations. These women, wives, daughters, servants, were the stewards of the domestic sphere, the unsung keepers of cleanliness and protection. While the crocodile god may have had his high priests and gold-inlaid temples, in the home it was the matriarch who ensured that Sobek's blessings were woven into every scrubbed floor and polished threshold. Historians still debate how much autonomy ancient Egyptian women truly had. Some argue that women held remarkable legal rights for the time. They could own property, initiate divorce, and even serve as priestesses. Others suggest that this view may be overly romanticized, drawn from elite records that don't reflect the average woman's experience. Still, what seems consistent is the deep respect Egyptians held for the feminine role in both domestic and spiritual life. You picture a woman rising before dawn, pulling water from the well while the stars are still glinting in the black sky. She gathers dried crocodile dung from a sealed clay jar, mixing it with ash and a fragrant oil, perhaps frankincense or myrrh, depending on the household's wealth. She does this not with disdain, but with focus, her movements steady and practiced. She isn't just cleaning, she's casting a kind of spell, layering the walls and doorways with protective intent. A quiet ritual passed down from her mother and her mother's mother before that. There's an old saying, carved on a crumbling wall in a village not far from Thebes. The goddess walks where the floor is pure. It's a simple line, easy to overlook. But to the Egyptian mind, it meant something profound. Cleanliness wasn't just for comfort, it was the path to inviting the divine into your life. And so, these women weren't just housekeepers, they were spiritual gatekeepers. You think of the rhythm of their days, the slow and deliberate movements of tending to the home, the hum of a song under their breath as they swept, the clink of pottery being set on a shelf, the firm hand smoothing the edges of a crocodile dung paste along a doorframe. Every task was a tether between the earthly and the divine, and every tool, even the strange and smelly ones, was a thread in the tapestry of balance and order. Even their children understood the ritual. You imagine a little boy giggling as he helps smear a bit of the blessed mixture along a doorway, only half understanding what it means. His mother gently guiding his hand, reminding him of Sobek's watchful gaze, and how even laughter is welcome in the sacred cycle. You smile, eyes fluttering closed, at the idea that cleaning a house could once be a form of storytelling, a practice that tied people to gods, to ancestors, to the land itself. It's easy to see how modern cleaning, so frantic and sterile, has lost some of that magic. Today, we reach for antiseptics and air fresheners. They reached for something messier, more mysterious, yet, in its own strange way, more connected. And still, it worked. The homes felt safe. The boundaries were guarded, not just from dirt or illness, but from the unseen. Bad dreams, bitter spirits, creeping chaos. Everything had a place, and every ritual had its role. You let that thought carry you further, your breath deepening, your limbs slack and heavy. The world around you narrows to a single image, a quiet home lit by the soft flicker of oil lamps, a woman smoothing crocodile dung onto the floor, her motions sure and serene. There's peace there, even in the strangeness. And maybe, just maybe, a whisper of Sobek's blessing in the still air. You're almost fully asleep now, swaddled in softness, only a sliver of thought drifting just beneath the surface. But before you float off completely, there's one final image to settle into. A walk through an ancient Egyptian marketplace. Not the flashy avenue of golden trinkets and rare incense, but the quieter back lanes where locals shop for household staples. Yes, even crocodile dung. You step out onto the sandy path, the sun warm but filtered by an awning of woven reeds. Around you, the gentle thrum of voices rises, not loud, but constant. Traders, mothers, children chasing goats between baskets. The air smells of clay pots, cumin, dried fish, and something earthy. And no, it's not unpleasant, just honest. You pass stalls with fresh figs, chunks of salt, linen scraps, and tucked beside them, squat jars with lids marked by crude little crocodile symbols. This, you now know, is the good stuff. Dried, powdered, and neatly pressed crocodile dung, sold by the handful for scrubbing, smearing, or mixing into one's domestic rituals. The vendor is an older man with a milky eye and a dry sense of humor. From only the holiest beasts, he says with a wink, fed nothing but pomegranates and papyrus. You chuckle, knowing full well that Sobek's disciples probably threw in some leftover goat stew. Still, people buy it, carefully measured, weighed, and tied up in tiny linen sachets. One woman even asks if he has the kind from the Fayum region. Apparently it's better for deterring nightmares. The man grins. Only on Tuesdays. Historians still argue whether this market-level dung trade was widespread or localized to temple towns. Some sources suggest it was a fringe practice, mainly among priestly households. Others insist it was as common as buying flour. And since archaeological remains don't always preserve such humble materials, the debate may never be resolved. But what can be pieced together is the intent. This wasn't just about hygiene, it was about assurance. About giving people the sense that their homes were protected, that their floors wouldn't crack, that their children wouldn't fall ill, and that no evil spirit dared cross a crocodile-marked threshold. There's even a fragment of a papyrus letter written by a woman to her sister, asking for the paste that wards off whispers. Scholars suspect this referred to a crocodile dung blend used to cleanse rooms before childbirth. Because when you're about to bring new life into the world, even a little dung can feel like divine insurance. You picture her mixing it in a quiet room, whispering a prayer, smoothing the paste across the floor with care and love. Not because she was superstitious, but because it was tradition. Comforting, tangible. It made her feel safe. And safe is how you feel now, lying still beneath your own roof, knowing that strange rituals have always helped humans settle the chaos. Eventually, the market around you fades. Sound first, then scent, then light. You step away from the stall with your imaginary pouch of crocodile dung, the last bit of the story tucked safely into your hand like a charm. And now, you're back here, in your room. The fan still hums softly. The lights are low. You've wandered a long, winding path through ancient Egypt tonight, from the messy to the magical, from crocodiles to comfort. You've laughed at odd rituals, felt the weight of tradition, and touched the edge of what it meant to keep a home clean in a world ruled by gods and sand. Let's slow everything down now. The wind down begins. You're lying still. The story has unraveled, and all that remains is quiet. A soft hush settles over your limbs, heavy and warm, like linen soaked in river water and dried in the sun. Your breath moves gently now, in and out, like the slow curl of the Nile at dusk. There's nothing you need to do, nowhere you need to be. Just a quiet place, a quiet night, and the echoes of ancient footsteps walking beside yours. The images blur, soft clay floors, flickering lamps, crocodile tails disappearing beneath reeds. Everything drifts, time thins, the border between then and now dissolves, and you, dear traveler, are safe. Let the air fill your chest like warm incense smoke. Let it out slowly, again and again, one more time. You are wrapped in ritual, in mystery, in the simplest acts of care passed down through thousands of years. They're yours now, yours to keep, to smile at, to rest in. So close your eyes. Settle your thoughts like a jar of dust on a still shelf. The crocodiles are sleeping, the lamps are out, and so are you. End of script. Sweet dreams.